This panel discussion is on Pop Lit for Kids, introduced by the World Scientific Education, presented as part of the Asian Festival of Children's Content 2021. My name is Joanne Netushek from the National Institute of Education, Singapore, and I'll be moderating the conversation. Our conversation this evening centers on a series of 6 books that take folklore stories from Asia and the West and reimagines them into in my opinion, the stories are an excellent introduction for children to classical tales. Find these stories embellished with colorful text, pop-up words, and illustrations, augmented reality features that invite our young readers into the worlds of old. I don't wish to say too much about the stories, leaving it to the writers who will introduce you to their story worlds, their writing intentions, and their desired outcomes. Let me introduce you to our 4 illustrious writers for this wonderful series. And they are Miss Hidayah Amin, Miss Hidayah Amin, the voice behind the Malay Annals, Ying Ping, who retold Journey to the West, and Ms. Mallika Naguran, who took on the task of re-envisioning the Ramayana for kids. So let's begin our conversation this evening with our first speaker, Hidayah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm the writer of the Malay Annals. So maybe I'll just explain a little bit about writing and choosing the 6 stories for the Malay Annals. I'm going to show you, this is the very old Sejarah Melayu or the Malay Annals. You know that I even had to like kind of like tie it with a rubber band because it's falling apart. And if you read the Malay Annals, the language is the olden Malay, which is very difficult to understand. So I had a very difficult time trying to even understand the stories, and there were many stories in the Malay Annals. So we have to choose like stories that I think can appeal to children. So I actually went through, yes?
Hidayah, I think we just pause here for a minute, just to remind participants, if you could please turn off your microphones so that we can, have better audio. So if you could just turn off your microphones, please. Thank you. Okay, sorry, Hidayah, please continue. We can't hear you, Hidayah.
Okay, sorry, it was muted somehow. Okay, so I went to do a lot of research about this. So there were a few books. I mean, the recent ones, not so recent. This, and then we have even John Lydon came out with the English version. But unfortunately, the English version is like a direct translation of the older Malay. So, which is very, like I said, very difficult to understand. And there were a lot of facts that are contradictory. So I do not know whether it was misunderstood or what. So in choosing the stories, there are 6 stories, and I chose the one that that I feel the kids can identify, especially those in the region in Southeast Asia. They are more familiar with, for instance, Badang the Strong, because it's linked to the Singapore stone. And then, or how Singapore got its name, because it all happened when Sanila Utama came to Temasek and then name it Singapura. So things that kids are familiar with, and even if they're not familiar with, their parents may be familiar with, because there were like even Malay films, like when the Garfish attacked Singapura. So I watched it as a kid, and I really enjoyed it. And then I didn't know that it is part of the Malay Annals. And then recently, if you have a Netflix account, you have the Putri Gunung Ledang, or the Princess of Mount Ophir. So and it is so, if for children to see this, on the big screen. And then you will probably will be wondering, like I was when I was a child, like, oh, are these stories real? Or things that I can and then you're curious and you want to read more. So the 6 stories that I've chosen also included Hang Tuah and Hang Jebat, the very famous warriors of Malacca. And just one story which I thought, about the kangkong, the eating of the water spinach, and I wish was not, when I was growing up, it was not very familiar. And I thought it's quite interesting because it's also to showcase how Malacca and China had this diplomatic
You see, this Hong
alliance.
Kong churned
Yes.
it out fast. Got 3 books out to bring
Yeah, so I think that's
Asian
what
stories
I'm gonna like.
for
Yeah,
really
that's
young
all.
kids. So there's Madang again. That's the same artist that.
Okay, so thanks so much, Hidayah. So I'm just gonna have another reminder. Sorry, guys, but you just put yourself on mute. Yeah, so thank you, Hidayah, for giving us some insight into the process of story selection and the kinds of stories that were delightful for you as a child, right? And these kinds of stories you chose, right, for this particular selection, and it always works. What delights us, right, is something we can share. Our next speaker is Ying Ping, and she's going to give us some insight into her experience, intentions, right, for Journey to the West. So Ying Ping, yeah, over to you if you can share it with us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone again. Okay, I think many of you know already that Journey to the West is one of the 4 great Chinese classics. So I have many fond memories of watching TV and movie versions of it when I was a child. So when World Scientific approached me to do a children's adaptation of it, I was thrilled and I said yes. Although I think I may have said, let me think about it first before I said yes. Must play a bit hard to get, no, but seriously, I did have to think a little bit whether I could do it, because I know that Journey to the West has been adapted a million times, and I wasn't sure if I could bring anything new to it. So, but fortunately for me, I think many of the children adaptations are meant for older children, and many of them are in comic book form. So for me, the challenge was to adapt for a much younger audience of about 7 to 10 years old, and in a chapter book form. So one good thing was that I had a very good illustrator, Ng Hui Fong, and with her very wonderful illustrations, she really helped me to bring my story alive and to make it really special as well, something different from the others that are already out there. So in writing my adaptation, I had 2 main considerations. I wanted to be true to the spirit of the original, and I also wanted to make it appealing to a very young audience, and especially for reluctant readers. As a former teacher myself, it's always been my goal to convert as many reluctant readers into lifelong readers as possible. So yeah, so this series, I actually envisaged it to be in 3 books, and this is the first book that's just come out. And it begins with Sun Wukong's birth, and it ends with Tripitaka having collected his full complement of disciples. So actually, even though the original book is really very long, it was relatively easy for me to select the episodes to include in this volume. I think mainly because the key elements of Wukong's origin story are pretty iconic. So we have his birth from a rock, how he gained his magical powers, where he got his weapon, and then how he created chaos in heaven, and so on. So it was quite easy for me actually to select these iconic episodes to put in this book. And in fact, the title Chaos in Heaven for the first volume is taken from a famous Chinese phrase, Sun Wukong 大闹天宫, which basically means Sun Wukong creating chaos in the heavenly palace. So I had all the elements there ready for me to take for my volume. So it'll be in volumes 2 and 3 where I had to choose which of the many adventures to include in my book. that was more challenging. But I'll talk about that, I think, when those volumes are out. So as mentioned earlier, even though my adaptation is very much simplified, I wanted to keep to the spirit of the original as far as possible. So for example, the Journey to the West is very much celebrated in China for its humor. And I found that children's adaptations tend to leave that out. I think because they have to be concise, and then the authors try and cram as much of the fun and adventure and action into the story rather than have all the extraneous things like humor. So I wanted to bring the humor back. And so actually, many of the funny bits in my adaptation are taken from the original, although I've modernized them a little bit. And of course, I've added in additional jokes of my own. And then, yeah, another way I tried to be true to the spirit of the original is that the original text has a lot of poems in it. So every few pages you have a poem, you know. When I was reading it, I was like, this is like watching a musical. You know, the actors are on stage talking, and then they just like burst into song out of nowhere. So in the original Journey to the West, it's like that. Every few pages, the author will just sprout a poem, you know, about the scenery, about the demons, about clothing, but any possible excuse you can think of. So of course, I knew I couldn't just translate those poems. They are too lengthy, complex, and to be honest, incredibly boring. So what I did was I actually wrote my own that I hope will appeal to kids. I made them a little bit silly, a little bit funny, and I had a poem in every chapter. So hopefully that will excite the kids a little bit. So yeah, then another thing is that I tried to also include some of the crucial explanations that I found were missing in children's adaptations, because they try and be concise, right? So some of the things like why is Tripitaka called Tripitaka? Or why can't Sun Wukong just carry Tripitaka and fly him to the Western Paradise, you know? Basically, it's the same question that Lord of the Rings readers ask. Like, why can't the eagles just fly Frodo and the ring to Mount Doom? So I tried to, despite the constraint of space and word count, to include these things that used to mystify me as a kid. Yeah, so then of course there are the non-fiction articles, which I think they're spotlighting right now on the screen, so which will help to add more context to the story. Yeah, so I think that's all the time I have to share with you now. You can ask me more questions later. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ying Ping. Yeah, thank you. Engagement is a big thing in rewriting, right? In retelling stories for children, and you're focused, right, on engaging them, and just recalling your reading experience, right, as a child reader, right? It's so interesting, right, hearing your process for this particular story. Thank you. Our next speaker is, of course, she took on a mammoth task, I felt. And so we just cannot wait to hear from her. Mallika, I just have to leave it to you to share with us your experience in reimagining the Ramayana for kids. We can't hear you, Mallika.
Yeah, okay. Pretty much. It was a mammoth task. In fact, when I was approached to write the Ramayana, I thought, it's impossible, because the Ramayana, as you know, was written many, many moons ago. In fact, it was written in 4th century BC. Sorry, it started, being narrated in 4th century BC. So pretty much it's a story that has been passed on, by word of mouth. It's like a folk tale, and people just spread the stories around. And over time, as oral tradition goes, things change. And it was only in the 1st century AD that this person called Valmiki captured it and wrote it, and he wrote it in Sanskrit. And so I learned that there were 60,000 verses that described the Ramayana, right? So Ramayana means the journey of Rama. Yana is journey of Rama, right? So it's a journey of Rama rescuing Sita, from the demon king Ravana. So, but so in doing the research, I had to grab hold of several resources. I had luckily, the Brockingtons translated Valmiki's into English. So I read that. I read R.K. Narayanan's prose version as well, which is a bit more modified. And I read other books, and I watched an animated film, which had a Japanese production. So that was all very good. So, and putting the story together for the new generation, the challenge was how to make it relatable, how to make it enjoyable, how to turn a dramatic story with rather complex plots and complex characters into, people who kids can identify with. So that was the greatest challenge for me. And the other challenge was to try to just shut my ears from what people tell me what Ramayana is. So I kind of read the Ramayana and I thought, you know what? Apart from Rama, Lakshmana is quite a cool guy, So, and Lakshmana is Rama's brother, and in this screen that we're seeing, Rama has risen to the challenge of stringing the bow, and he's so strong to the point that he's able to break the bow, and that's a challenge to win Sita's hand in marriage. But he did it because Lakshmana urged him, right? And in writing the story, I made it a bit fun, I made it a bit romantic, like, Rama, he looked at Sita, who was sitting in the palace, window, and they exchanged glances. And, he kind of fell in love. So I tried to make it more relatable. He was very much a human being, because Rama's seen, like, in today's context, the Ramayana has a lot of relevance to Hinduism, and it resonates with many, many Indians. So, because Rama overcame King Ravana, so there's this element of victory over evil, and which is celebrated through this festival called Deepavali. So Deepavali is essentially the festival of light. And you can trace that back to Rama overcoming King Ravana to rescue Sita, right? So, yeah, and I think, so I think, I could tell you more, as we go along this session. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Mallika. Yeah, the importance of heroes, right, in our local narratives. So important to introduce the kids, right, to our heroes and the role they play, right, really in our lives, right. So important. But yeah, it was amazing. So we're moving into this segment because we just have about half an hour. So we're moving into a segment where we're going to have a little bit of a chat with the writers about their, about the stories, about their process. And if you have a question, do put it in the chat channel, and we'll direct it to the author, okay, that you wish to hear from. But include your name, please, so that we can address you. Yeah. So do we have any questions in the chat? If not, I'll start with one from Josh Ang, who left us a question, right? And this is really for Ying Ping. And Josh asks, your first series is targeted at more advanced readers. What were the challenges in Ping you faced when writing for younger readers?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Yeah,
I had tons of challenges, to be honest. First of all, is the word count. because I wasn't used to writing for such a young audience. And how do you squeeze a whole story into 6,000 words? So the way I got around it was I bargained with the publisher and I said, I need to do it in 3 volumes. I can't do it in 1 volume. And even then it was very difficult because there's so much detail in the original that I want to put in that's so interesting. So so that was one problem I had. And then of course, also because the readers are very young, so I think it's harder to keep them engaged and focused than for an older audience. So right from the start, I knew that I was going to have to put humor in to keep the audience engaged. And I think also the vocabulary, because some of the ideas and even the names in the original text are quite complex. So how do I find a simple enough vocabulary that can still accurately translate or adapt the book without alienating my young readers? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, right. So it's so true, you know, because they're so detailed, right? These works, they're so detailed. I mean, what do you include, right, that will entertain them yet, you know, engage them, right? So very, very true. Our next question, I think we're going to field it to Hidayah first, and then maybe Mallika can respond. The question comes from Melody Chong, and she asks, what's the inspiration behind your stories, and how did you hone your skills for storytelling? So Hidayah, you want to try? You gotta unmute.
Yes. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I chose the stories that are very familiar, or at least you have heard the name, like Hang Tuah, and then we made the mistake of calling it swordfish when it's actually garfish. So there's some fish involved attacking Singapore, and then you have the princess of Mount Ophir, and we all know Mount Ophir is in Malaysia. So the sense of familiarity, and I thought kids will be interested because they see something familiar. And then I also in the book, I actually when at the end of each story, I will kind of have these bits of information, like for instance, maybe Badang the strong, right? So I said, like, the boulder which Badang threw was later called as a Singapore stone. Fragments of the stone are on display at the National Museum of Singapore. So the kids are able to, the children are able to kind of make sense of, oh, okay, so that this character did exist. So, or maybe then I'm interested to see this stone. So in a way, it's a kind of like encourage the children and family bonding. The kids say, hey, look, this Hidayah said that the stone is at the museum. Can we go and see? I want to see for myself. Yeah. So storytelling wise, I try to I try to keep as closely to the real story. And even some of the words used in the Sejarah Melayu, like I said, it was very complex. So in a way, I really had to think of trying to write it simply for children, which, as you all know, writing for children is one of the hardest thing to do. So
exactly.
yeah.
Also the heroes, right? And that we're really a people. We have our heroes, right?
Yes.
So you don't have to go to Marvel Comics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Heroes all the time, right?
Yes, you see, we have our own Incredible Hulk, right? So it's called Badang. Yeah.
Mallika, you wanna chime in?
Yep. So we have in the Ramayana, there's this incredible Kumbhakarna, who's the giant, his sleeping giant. He's always sleeping and hungry, so he rises to the occasion to help his brother King Ravana to fight Rama. So there's a lot of monsters and hyperbolic events, a lot of heroes and the evil one. So there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of action. And I think I was motivated to write the Ramayana for young children. And yeah, like Ying Ping, I've not written for that young kid before, you know, so we're talking about ages 6 to 11, depending on their reading ability. So yeah, it's really how do you make characters accessible, right? So yeah, and so what I tried to do was you know, use a lot of visual elements, sensorial techniques. You know, the smell of bread when Rama and Lakshmana rode their horses into the kingdom. Yeah, and you know, also I tried to use dialogue to make the characters come alive. So everyone had a particular way of speaking. You know, Lakshmana likes to whistle, and Hanuman's a bit cheeky. So humor is also you know, a big thing. You know, I think for kids, like, you know, just look at how kids talk to each other, and sometimes it's a bit slapstick. You know, it's a bit yeah, it's very simple, right? So in the Ramayana, you know, I kind of introduced you know, the some creative what do you call it, the creative license or artistic license. Yeah, so I had Hanuman grow tall, you know, but before that he said, yeah, give me some room, and then he started to hum, and then he started to dance, and then he said, okay, now I'm going to grow big, and then he grew big, and then Lakshmana whistled, and Rama went like, wow, you know, and then later Lakshmana said, do you have to hum and dance before you grow big? He said, no, I was just teasing you because you humans believe what you see.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
But that's not in the text, so I created that. Right. So as an artist and a writer, you know, it's like you just take the essence of the character, and then you kind of like give them their distinct personality, and I think that's so important, you know. Yeah, I think what I also tried to do was alter the pace of the narration, so that when children read, they get a sense of action or suspense or sadness. So what I did was, after having written, I read out my own text. And if I'm tripping over my own sentences, big words, I change the words, right? Because I don't want the kid to be rereading the sentence. You know, that's not how it works. And I also got my family members and my friends to read to their kids, or got the kids to read to them. And then they tell me they found it too difficult. You know, they stumbled over this, your chapter is too long. You know, so all this kind of feedback really helps.
And also, you know, because I also took a look at the stories, and, you know, it's so important for kids to get a sense of personalities. Yeah. So I think that's what you're saying, Mallika, right? That's
absolutely
a person's character in a functional sense, but personality, right? A person looks at character. This is his personality is like this, you know. So it's important. Yeah, lovely. We have a question from Melanie as well about purchasing, where it can be purchased. And I think Serene has given some answers about where it might be. We'll also be giving you some information on where it might be purchased. Joyce has asked about audio versions of the book, and I guess this preempts our question about what are some of the augmented reality elements that you used in your story. So let's start with Ying Ping. Before we see the video, or should we see the video first? What do you think, girls?
Actually, I don't have much to say about the augmented reality bit, because it's something that I think the publisher worked with the company to produce, and I only saw it 2 days ago for the first time. So, yeah, so really it's not my effort at all. So perhaps you can just watch the video. And
okay, let's watch the video then, right? Because we're running out of time as well. Yeah, let's go.
I am the king of Palembang. I am a descendant of Raja Suran. who descended from Alexander the Great. Hello, Junior Sultan. Antonyms are words with the opposite meaning. What word on this page is an antonym for poor? That's the wrong answer. Try again. Congratulations, Junior Sultan. Prosperous is the opposite of poor. Keep reading to find out what Badang can do. Now that you have read about Sang Nilai Utama and Badang, can you help answer these questions? What about
Okay, so anything to add to that little video about how it adds to the sense of the story? Anybody, the Hidayah, do you feel that it adds to the story?
I think using, of course, children nowadays, they are very much into gadget, and just reading alone might not be enough for them. So when you have all these elements, they are more like, okay, let's go and use the phone and try. So I think it's it will kind of again pick their curiosity, and then maybe by answering some questions, enhance the understanding of the story.
Yeah, that's right. Mallika, anything?
Yeah, so some of the words are illustrated, in the text, right? So a few words pop up. And I think that's pretty important for children of young age to, visually, it helps them pick up the reading, and it kind of like helps them build their vocabulary. And the books have a nonfiction section, so there'll be like 2 nonfiction articles, and this is where the children can read, or the parent or the teacher can read, and then they can have a discussion over what's there. So I think these books are pretty cleverly put together, because they just have storybook, and they have the augmented reality version, they have quizzes and all that. So I think it's a pretty good package for children.
Okay, so it leaves me now to thank everybody. It's just a conversation that's just too short, yeah? So thank you everybody for joining us. I'd like to thank the writers for their time and just their insight, right? For the rest of you as well, thank you for joining us in this conversation. The books, the Malay Annals, Journey to the West, Ramayana, Around the World in 80 Days, Sherlock Holmes, Robin Hood, they're all available at the official AFCC bookstore or closetfulofbooks.com, Lazada, all major bookstores. Don't forget to get a copy. Thank you very much, guys, and have a very good evening.